here with my broken tooth today. It's a great excitement, of course, to welcome you to my home and the home of Biofield Viewer in Colorado. And we're very much looking forward to this session, Biofield View images. But before we get into that, I thought it would be possible to have a little think about this whole concept of biofield interpretation. And how far do we go back? Because clearly there have been clairvoyants, seers, who've been capable of interpreting the biofield. And I bear witness to times in the past where it was much more widely accepted. But in terms of using techniques and artifacts apart from clairvoyance, one of the most exciting, it's not working. No, I think it is working. You have to try it somewhere. Kimberly Shipke, my partner and colleague, is very kindly just making sure it's working, but I think it's just not working on the phone because it says it's all working. The Greeks clearly used to paste clay on the body and watch it dry. That's at which the clay dried. For them to observe whether organs particularly and aspects of the system are heated and therefore perhaps drying quickly or more slowly and revealing other information. So by using this technique, they were able to derive a scale, a spectrum of analysis, which of course is very clever. And this thermal range of the spectrum, and of course we claim the biofield is measurable within the thermal range, the visible range, and the ultraviolet range, and potentially beyond. But these are the ranges that our institute, Centre of Biofield Sciences, has been observing in the biofield. There's a fabulous book. It's Thames and Hudson produced it. I have to come back to it. I've got Sacred Mirrors running around my brain. But it's a fabulous book on the human aura. I think it's there's several books with Thames and Hudson. So if you're interested and you can get on eBay or something, have a look, because there's 4 or 5 books. One on chakras, I think, one on subtle energy. I think it's the subtle energy book that I'm speaking about. There's a very interesting image from the late 1800s, and it's clearly a Kirlian photograph taken in France. A Kirlian photograph because now we associate electrographic imaging with Kirlian, and that was because he was working with a high voltage machine, as you may know, in the 40s, and he didn't have any apparatus to capture the information, but he just had his hand near the machine and he could see all the bioplasmic streamers. And he was like, wow, that's very strange. If I can get a bit of film in a box and capture that stuff, maybe there's some useful information in there. That's his process. And he developed the electrographic process, which has now got over 1,000 different models. Interestingly, you can make a Kirlian device for about $50, $60. The components required are easily accessible. America, Radio Shack probably has most of the components, and you know, I think you need a starter motor from a car and a couple of odd things like that, and you're away. But equally, you can actually see all the blueprints for how to manufacture a Kirlian device. And interestingly, this is how I do biofield science, because South India, at a ceremony, some of you may have heard some of this story, I was at the ceremony, and there were scientists from all over the world there. I was officially a journalist, but did sort of get really in with the gang, as it were, and there were lots of quite famous swamis there, scientists from Berkeley, from top universities all around the world, and there was this one lady called Rosemary Steele. Quite sufficient equipment with her, and she was the chief priest, and every few hours they would take a set of images. So to cut a very long story short, the ceremony lasted about 27 days, I think it was. The chief priest needed to learn all these mantras for 27 years. The priest is supposed to leave 4 days, and so they got the Kirlian camera there because they wanted to see if his energy did leave his body. And of course, he had beautiful hand Kirlian pictures, 15, 16 days, and when he was supposed to leave his body, there was no print at all. And of course, this was front page news in all the newspapers in India, because it was, I guess it was in the early 90s, 91. It's now that, you know, these religious ceremonies had something to them. They're concerned about whether the Kirlian photography needed to be proved. As you may know, India and Russia's got a very strong connection, and Russia, which is to the east, have always different aspects. In the West, where the pharmaceutical stronghold kind of keeps others out, and they become little alternatives at our. Anyhow, let's keep on track. Kirlian photography clearly is a precursor to a lot of the we've made. And what's required? You need a charged plate. Going back 25 years, I remember spending some time with Nigel Garrin Hutchins, a dear friend from the UK who runs companies, fullspectrum.org.uk. I managed to pull that out, luckily. And he's a brilliant fellow and teaches and has taught Kirlian and the British style for many years. And I say British style because it does seem to be quite different. The Russian style, the German style, the British Kirlian doing a quick palm reading. They're not looking at individual fingertips and extrapolating that out through to the organs. They're just quite happy original data. That's what I mean to say. And it is fascinating. Nigel and I were tinkering around. Eventually, he sold the system to Toyota. It was a process whereby we could get a video camera, Kirlian process live, instead of what we were having to do before, which was film, to expose it to the information, and then obviously have to go to a darkroom and develop it afterwards. By having a video to see the process in color, and he achieved that by having 2 pieces of glass and an electrolyte liquid inside, a bit like a mini fish tank, straight through. And this actually was a very clever advance, because before people just had electrographic charge coming through a box that passed into that film that I was speaking about. So because also we're suddenly liberated from size. Now we've got this great big kind of fish tank, anything through it. And obviously you have to get close enough, or touching the glass from the other side to get the effect. Streamers will pass through both panes of glass, and It's a very interesting effect, and I'll go and see his previously mentioned full spectrum. Okay. I've been in touch with him, he's of ours, and therefore a dear buddy of anyone watching this. There are different Kirlian processes. It's interesting in the development of GDV. Konstantin Korotkov, from various different ways of interpretation and its development. And I think this is quite important, actually. Originally and traditionally, the GDV, which is the latest Kirlian type machine, really, they were sort of flummoxed by the fact that they could only really nicely get the fingertips. There was a lot of extrapolation going on, but clearly information, say, from the gallbladder and the bladder meridian wasn't coming directly through. And that's why they leapt from traditional acupuncture meridian analysis. Mendel's German fellows, interestingly, it's a dear old friend of mine called Park J. Woo's technique. Now, Park J. Woo developed, probably 30 years since I've seen him, no, a bit less. Sujok allows body to be represented in the hand, but it is a big leap from traditional Chinese or traditional Oriental meridian approach. So doing this for 10 years with just traditional medicine, then they use Mendel's technique, and then they've now used the Sujok technique. So a lot of rewiring, and I assume it's just gotten more and more accurate and better and better. We've used it in every study we've ever done. So if colleagues of mine who are working with Biofield Viewer are interested, then I would recommend getting the BioWell too. In the new network version of the GDV. The GDV was always a bit expensive, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13,000 pounds. A version which was basically really just a camera and in a box with a USB, and you're connected to the guts of the thing. Online to use it, I'm not sure. Maybe you do. It's a bit of an inconvenience for us doing field research. And the other aspect, of course, is you've got to pay an annual subscription. Ever since, you know, I met the printer, I was always horrified by the price of printer inks. And there's even a Mickey Mouse Aura camera where the fellow charged $1,000 for a thumb runs out, you've got another couple of $1,000 for another one, even though you bought the system for $8,000. So you can see where our ethics come from. Ultimately, what is our agenda, which is to give access to people to our technology and to make it unlimited in that they can use it, they can get all our upgrades. We're already on free. In just a few years, and the developments keep coming because everyone gets involved in our team, and more people get the Biofield Viewer. There's more funds available for developing beautiful organic stories we're having, and I'm happy to report to all of you that in the last few months, well, since January, since our tour started, Kimberly and I did a lecture tour, our sales have doubled, and that means we've got twice as many people every month joining us from all over the world, I might add. The information that's being generated is phenomenal, and this really was our agenda. Having spent 20 years in the lab doing our own thing, was now we've got to show and share, show and tell. This is part of what this process is. Anyhow, so we've had a little historical tour through various different processes, clairvoyance, clearly, using mud, working with the older device, electric techniques and the GDV, And then now his age. And of course, it's a delight for me that our colleague John Catchpole, inventor of this technique. He was drawn as a genius schoolboy, mathematics, physics, and interestingly, when Mandelbrot in the early 80s was first discovering fractals, young John, the schoolboy, was writing programs. And as you may know, 20 years, the tail wagging, trading on various markets around the world. And a lot of this trading is based on the type of programming that John is highly skilled in. And these guys get paid millions. And the reason why that is because one of the fundamentals of chaos theory, fractal nature, what's going to happen next, because it's observing all the live information. We're not putting in just random, oh gosh, I think expenses are relevant. No, no, this is a real living, dynamic, what we call non-linear. And the fact that we're using exactly the same technique, but in service to mankind, to predict their health. We've got an input of a video camera of them, and it's a live feed of all of them. And the nonlinear program is able to respond instantly to what it's seeing, observing, and calculating. It actually is a much higher application of this technique. And I feel in a way that energetically we're counterbalancing that this beautiful discovery of nature has been put into a feedlot for the few workers and investment people. We're releasing it much more genuine unity. Is for much better use of it. With Apple, well, not directly, the British company that provides a lot of the components before he worked with us. And he was able to retire from his experiences there, because it really was right at the of the leading edge of the pit edge analogy. In fact, if you ask him, he'll tell you that he wasn't even writing software himself in the latter couple of years. He was the guy. All the other software programmers' code was accurate mistake. So I guess that's the haystack guy you need to Biofield Viewer, and I'm excited that we're launching 3.3 today. I hope you've all got your latest versions of the software. If you haven't, it might be a good idea to drop an email to John and you an updating link. Obviously, if you're not yet a Biofield Viewer user, that may go over your head, but perhaps we can encourage you. If you can see at the bottom of my name here, our website, you can get on there and order one. We've certainly made it affordable to everybody that if they use it at a trade show for just one weekend, they can pay for it. So, so I'm going to show you some slides, and that means things are going to swivel around a bit. I'm going to share my screen, and in turn I shall disappear for some time, but hopefully my will keep you amused whilst we journey through Biofield Viewer interpretation. Just before I do that, you know, after we've had our little journey into the history of perhaps biofield imaging and biofield science, and technologies that we've been able to use for interpretation. This is an open book. There are all kinds of other things out there, and look forward to hearing from any of you if you've got some insights. Anyone I've missed? There are so many. But I know Ruth Drown was taking some interesting images with her radionics camera many years ago, and because she was able to take a picture of an embryo. They were doing this as a service to young Irish girls who were pregnant at the time. As you may know, Catholic Ireland didn't allow for abortion. And so they were doing this early kind of testing service where if the girl sent a drop of blood or whatever to her lab in Oxford, she could see if they were pregnant or not. Pretty advanced stuff, really. And amazing radionic fetuses. Yeah, I think that's about it. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it's all going to tip on seamlessly. I want to show an application window. I want to show that one. And there we go. Hopefully it's all going to work seamlessly. Present to everybody. Although now I'm not giving myself a chance. Hello. Okay, so hopefully this will work. Where's that moment? Disappears. Ooh, I think that's right. Okay, so welcome part of this presentation takes us into world of the biofield and our specific journey with it. So, as many are really comfortable describing the field as the human atmosphere, because it has so many correlates with, we have interpenetrating layers, which is a crucial the actual mathematics and geometry fields kind of and of course there are interesting things that people have corresponded with the energy centers that we have down our bodies. Era now for us to kind of have a fresh page where the threat of being quartered, or I've been watching a lot of videos recently of ancient history, fellows who are pushing the envelope and exploring these amazing new discoveries. They get derided by the Egyptologists and the historians, no end. You know, there's the public is buying their books in droves, and so you've got a situation where for the first time those are kind of muted by the fact that people have got something interesting to say. They don't have to become a professor at a university. They can actually just YouTube and make a video and present their stuff. It's of validity. Obviously interested in it, and they're going to buy into it. And people like Graham Hancock, who I'm speaking of, inspired me personally, because it's not quite the same in the medical field. Historians are kind of buffoons in with, you know, pipes, and you know they're not often listened to anyway. Whereas the medical community and the pharmaceutical industry has pretty much got the tail, as it were. So, you know, I'm not naive to thinking we've got such an easy ride. Going straight to the grassroots and just getting on with it is clearly the message, because you know, until these old fools leave their shoes, it's going to be a conflict, especially when it comes to the, you know, the important institutions in the world. But you know, we're not singing to that song sheet anymore. We're singing to a music, you know, which embraces all the different understandings, all these modern historical discoveries, all these health integrations that we've been able to make by studying Oriental medicine alongside Vedic medicine, alongside modern medicine, alongside quantum physics. And so we've got a much understanding of not only what we really are, but also how we kind of went wrong. One of the simple ironies, if you like, is that, you know, when you measure, say, it will have characteristics, and we often are very aware of the characteristics. For example, gravitational forces, which give it mass, and then there's electromagnetic forces, which give it charge, and then in the case of this image, torsion field, torsion forces of torsion, torque, its spin. And it's interesting that we now look at the human being in totality, you know, from the outside looking in, much than body that with us since Gray's Anatomy was the medical look. But to me, the body is a kind of a dead body, and you know, the being in the body is what, and it really is this quest, I guess, supported by new science and the integration of these different traditions, which of course is the hugest thing. You know, for example, and helped set up a lab at IIT in Chennai with a professor who wanted to calibrate the Varma points and the acupuncture points. New technology, Russian device there is. Crikey. Something for the actual streamers coming out of the ants. Machine, I'll have to later about that. I'm not even sure that we had one in our lab for a while, and it was fascinating. Of course, over so what type of a situation, because measuring individual points is a process when you can already. But anyhow, of the whole field, isn't this the big story? And I appreciate some of this text is not that visible. You know, why did it happen to me? That our Biofield Viewer system is supported by the amazing iteration of new modalities which work with a vast array of different tools. In this case, we're seeing this biofield tuning technique by Eileen McCusick, and I think you can see the website up there, biofieldtuning.com, using tuning forks. And of course, each of these different modalities, iterations from themselves as our whole thing grows and evolves, have their own sort of techniques and protocols and decades of experience. So it's crucial, delightful to be able to resource now these maps. Before we had more esoteric and the type of emotional issues we're doing wasn't accessible because you like this either. So we're all evolving together. This is a real integration. Another one. Now, as far as this slideshow goes, As you know, I update my slideshows to slideshare.net. So if you're watching this right now and you'd like to grab one of these slides before they disappear, don't worry about that, because they're all there on slide.net. If you just, you know, search my name, because I don't remember the exact name of this slideshow, but it's the last one in yesterday. And so you can track what I'm saying and have these tools as a resource. I have to say also that we've not created these maps. If they have got their, you see, look, this guy's, I don't know whether he's written his logo on there, but I'm very happy to honor the so for example, this one is a simplified NET master chart. So, you know, all credit and respect and copyright to NET, but as an educational tool, I think it's important to share this information. So for example, if we're observing issues in the region, the energetic region we associate, say, with the stomach, or with, is it digestion here, you know, this person could be oversympathetic or expanded importance of self, you know, egoist and so forth. So stuff on board. Another one, the emotion code. Fabulous fellow. Recently spoke at a conference with him, Bradley Nelson in Utah. It's a huge crowd. Credit to Tammy for getting such a massive people there. It was so keen. Anyhow, the emotion code chart, we reference the heart, abandonment, betrayal. So when we're in our interpretation sessions, it's crucial to have this kind of legend at your disposal. So then when you find an area, an energetic region which is compromised in some way, maybe there's shielding or venting, we can probe with the right questions. And these questions inspire, and as you know, what I call build a channel of trust. But they also add, crucially, with this culmination of aha moments, to what we're now recognizing as a kind of, what, a phase shift. Not a kind of phase shift, a phase shift, when a healer live with the Biofield Viewer, and you can't predict when it's going to happen, and I have to say it doesn't always happen, because it's a culmination of process. The individual may not be strong enough in that set, so they may have to, you know, follow the instructions of their practitioner for a week or two of grounding and water drinking and whatever it is before that they can have the phase shift. But suddenly it'll happen, and it's like the whole biofield brightens, and it'll stay that kind of, is it an octave higher? Can we say that now? Anyhow, so maps are just so exciting. Chakras spin clockwise when functioning correctly. Well, that's a commitment there. I've seen other diagrams from Brennan, maybe Barbara and Brennan, because I can't quite tap into that particular source, but you know, where the chakras may spin alternately. So when we observe the Biofield Viewer image, we're come to see spinning chakras, but we certainly see the shape and the subtle changes at the chakra, and that gives us enough to be able to speak to the functionality of the chakras. Important. But anyway, we're not going through each and every one of these images. What we're doing is giving access to information and inspire. This is just a handful of the different charts that I've found. They definitely relevant to this conversation and us moving forward. you know, rejection area, guilt, shame, anger, outer world, inner world. Well, additional information to the basic chakra analysis, and I think it's important for us to, rather than just assuming everyone's right, first of all, go for all the corroborations, and that's what I like about the ones that I'm saying, is they do corroborate. I've seen grief, sorrow, sadness, loss coming into the heart center. Most of these images. Newer ones coming in. This is something that's been doing the rounds on this. So are we able to corroborate patterns? Like, for example, look at that shame pattern, or love, different and unique. But is that an overlay we can now use for our inquiry? It's clear that when we're using the Biofield Viewer, observing the spine or the area, looking at the energy flows, the little nuances, the poolings, the symmetry of the, we can clearly see the outlines of the vertebrae that are perhaps to optimization. And for example, perfect, and I'm sure some of you have studied and observed several spine images, and we can have a look hopefully at some today or another time. But it is, again, interesting how these charts synthesized from other modalities that us on physiology, and that biofield interpretation is a reading. It's a reading of the emotional state, the spiritual state, and the energetic counterplay with the physicality. So we don't speak about the organs, we certainly don't make a diagnosis of anything. We're just observing the bioplasmic streamers, the biophotonic emissions as they interact in our environment. And where there's a lack of all this pooling, we call shielding, or actual leaking energy, we call venting, we've got a significant conversation and an opportunity to streamline our protocol to suit this individual. So we don't need to chiropractic 7 clicks. We can actually specifically address the needs of this individual, and that's the way it's going. And that's what healthcare is all about. It's not, here's a hospital and we'll be ready for you at 4 o'clock in 3 months for your operation. More, you have an issue in the center of this hub, which professionals are going to serve you the best, and we're observing you in a preventative, holistic way as you find your or an optimization. And it is a, I'm sorry that they're cut off. I know they're not. These guys are French. I'm really into these guys. And they've, yeah, look, there we can honor the lady herself from Yanni Hollis. So honoring the artist, conductor with these images. Needs, relationship, the ego. Well, some of this we know: abandonment, identity, emotional bond, injustice, self-reliance, over. But of course, this is relation to the sphenoid, the skull, axilla, and so forth. Denial, separation, inhibition, pride. Well done, and the Reichian somatization correspondences. So I don't think we can waste any time exploring the other modalities out there and then bringing them in alongside your biofield viewer. Corroborating, it's a process. It's a live development process. Clearly this fellow has some pooling around the navel region, over the solar plexus, thickening in the band under the solar plexus, so potential energetic challenges to his digestion, pooling perhaps right down the bottom there in the area we associate with the prostate. So in the two arms, the thick around the throat, and again at the throat, that lovely blue we like to see is getting compromised by some shielding. So if we then go over to this particular chart and we're speaking to this fellow about feelings of betrayal or rejection, abandonment, for example, is that something he's going to relate to? Because if it is, and we can bring that thing into consciousness as we're doing with the image, he can then, even with his own mind, start creating a biofield back loop here to optimize. And the lovely brightness at the heart, that lovely green, is indicative that he is. Then track for this process, and you're just going to hold space for it, because it is a journey facing these different issues, perhaps with a voice therapy or modality of any kind that we would support. The changes taking place over the coming weeks. We have had a very strong interpretation story with the chakras. That because with the Biofield Viewer we have our own chakra viewer mode, and clearly we're getting some valuable information. In this particular case, we're seeing pooling at the top of the head, at the crown. So there's a little bit of doubt there, and yet the brow chakra is fairly bright and clear. That green is only offset by a little pink semicircle or full circle. There's a bit of an arrow over it. A little bit of stress. Clearly there's some kind of physical clenching going on, or poor dental hygiene that's leaving the pooling at the teeth area. Correspondingly, although he's got a lovely blue throat chakra there, kind of it, and thickening in the pink band around, which would be indicative of challenges to the lymphatic system from a biofield perspective, of course. Now, at the chest, so is this a kind of an environmental concern? Certainly the solar plexus seems okay, and then we've got a lot of shielding, and unfortunately when those colors don't seamlessly go from one color to another, you get those murky areas, a kind of dissipation at the edge, and then the murky colors coming through. Then we really know that, and the navel regions are the two areas that in this particular case perhaps we'd start working, and perhaps throat to help clear out the neurons. From an interpretation perspective, I've actually looked at the image. I hope so. I lost my picture for a second. Let's see what's happened. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. So what we're really doing is observing the image and taking from the image these, we're identifying, effectively using points that we're then going to be addressing perhaps in this upcoming session. Of course, you have the opportunity to take the image itself and take a baseline analysis by processing the image through ImageJ, which, as you know, is a free program developed globally at universities for image processing and image analysis, and therefore recognized by many of the different health agencies because it's a free open source program. And so we can create a wave shape of the individual when they first appear, and we can observe both the picture through the upcoming sessions. Now, as you all know, because most of you are over this part, we don't project onto our colleagues that they need a room, a very specific environment of a certain size, because there are different ways of calibrating. In some scientific procedures to be completely standardized, but because scientific labs and clinics are different shapes and sizes, we've developed a different way of calibration, and that is by using the eventual setup baseline image and seeing if it's in range. And we have ways to obviously manipulate the setup. For example, if you have a permanent setup, you might not have one of our light stands. You may have a fitted 4-foot bulb on the ceiling. Use with the chain opportunity to lower the back, for example, and lower the front too, if you have a small child or a dog or other animal. So even with the fixed system to travel within the range of our acceptability until you get it right. So what we've noticed is that the room reflects a lot of light back in, and that's good. But a big room, the light all disappears off. And so we even recommend in this particular setup to actually have one of those 2-bulb on the chain. So you actually have 2 spectrum bulbs. And as you may know, in America, you can go to Home Depot, and in the UK, many other places, and you can order them online. And the best actual full spectrum lights are about 20, 30 bucks. They come from a spiral in the glass. I've seen them in a lot of holistic clinics. But you can get a basic full spectrum light, white light, between $2. And you may already have our, I'm going to have to slides. Yeah, you may already have our recommended Husky light, but if you are in a permanent facility for some of the time, or you work in 2 different clinics, I would recommend getting a 4-foot light. If there's any issue about valuable stucco ceiling, what we really doing with drill holes, we're putting 2 eye hooks in there, and when that system is dismantled, a little bit of white plaster can just go in the tiny hole, and you wouldn't know. It would have to be a pretty, if I can use that word, who would disallow us to set up this system. Now, technology is evolving and improving all the time. We're still a big fan of the Logitech C920 webcam, but appreciate it's a couple of years old now, and they have already come out with one. And in fact, the new one too, the Logitech app. And you can see in this slide logitech.com if you haven't already got the app. It's actually not an app really, it's a whole program which supports the software. It's a controller which allows you to control the camera from your screen and from your keyboard. And if you notice this one here, for example, you can actually pan the camera within its little housing there. And for example, in certain circumstances, you may need to adjust the brightness or white balance or exposure just to optimize your imaging. So as well as the light, you have the ability to adjust so that make your baseline image like this, it's within range. And what I mean by within range, it's bright, the bands are symmetrical on the wall, there's no other light source which is creating any interference with those bands. Remember, those bands are what we call light intensity bands. They're revealing the gradations of light intensity. So the brightest area where the light is shining is that yellow area in the middle. You couldn't see with the naked eye. The biofield imaging system reveals these gradations. It's significant when an individual or a living system enters that space, because they will change the colors, they will change the bands, they will change the quality of the quality between the colors in the bands, and they will change the order of the colors. So all these things need to also potentially change the entire brightness of the space. And we're going to look at some of these images in due course. Why do we like full spectrum lighting? Now remember, these LEDs that we use, they're just bright white light, but I don't think we can claim they're full spectrum lighting. So there are shortcomings from us even using these particular light stands. We recommend a double 4-foot fluorescent, as this maintains the standards. But I mean, we're standardizing with the light and images. But as you can see from this graphs, the full spectrum has all of the colors in the spectrum. It's important for us because we're reading the spectrum colors. So if the light doesn't represent them, shortcomings. So when we speak about any kind of photography, let alone biofield imaging, biofield view, it's always conscious of shadow, because shadow to us is artifact, and we create our environment. Unlike this particular case study with these two balls, was the light shining directly on the person. So we don't have shadow on one side and bright on the other. We have the light shining brightly on the person. But for example, if someone has a very shiny forehead, you may find the light is reflecting from their forehead. So that could be an artifact, rather than perhaps they've got an amazing third eye. I mean, it's got to be in the right place, whereas this shine may be just slightly off center, which would perhaps give you a clue. But the best way to deal with artifacts, and when you're taking a biofield image, is to ask them to step forward. Step forward, just a little step, you'll see the shadow moving. Whereas if it's a biofield, it will move with the person, kind of, if you get what I'm saying. Whereas the shadow will drop down. Now this is the crucial part of the interpretation. It is taking of images, and obviously Biofield Viewer comes with an alignment line. Always recommending people buy a clear plastic ruler and run it up and down their computer screen, observing the differences, the line of the underwear, chief characteristics, to understand some of the biofield patterns that we're seeing. Now, when I say you need to take a set of images, it is important that you take a full set of images. In this case, there's even a focus in, a zoom in on the face, but we can do that with the computer screen. But there is more deal, so it is worthwhile doing. And it's crucial, especially for me training, this full set of images, because if you just send me a front shot and a back shot, which are clearly showing in the side images, for example. So we take the anterior profile image in Biofield Viewer, and then we just, with 2 fingers, flick backwards and forwards and take the same image while they're standing in the same position. And then we ask them to turn. And clearly it's better to do a side shot and then a back shot and then the other side shot. And again, going backwards and forwards between the 2 programs. Then we're going to have a moment where we're adjusting the tripod. And unless you've got a really good video tripod which has a wind down, you may even need to adjust the feet of your tripod. You may need to bring in one of the 3 sections. And if that's the case, I highly recommend you buy a packet which you can stick on the floor where the 3 feet go when it's extended for upper body imaging, and then when it's in the lower setting for lower body imaging. You will take better images the whole time. Now, notice in the lower images, he's standing on a white box. It doesn't need to be a box. It can just be a white sheet. Clearly, this one isn't big enough to fit into the image space. So, you know, get a big couple of meter square Formica sheet. Stand up behind something, a desk or a cupboard or something when you're not using it, or can roll up. But I think that's a very useful way of allowing us to see exactly what is going on at the feet. And of course, taking some additional images in the 3D mode, the more you use this program, the more you're going to be excited by it, because clearly we're seeing information highlighted a useful way. And as we're enacting out to deal with issues, we should be able to 3D settings going back into the more uniformity of the region. So, whether you need to have a pee break or not, but it's 11:57, so maybe in 3 minutes we'll have a pee break. If you do. But this would be a good slide to finish that first section with, because there are all kinds of different ways we can interpret the Biofield Viewer image, and trust that people come to us with a great mastery often of other modalities, and so they're able to experience into the interpretation process. For example, when I train someone who's a lymphatic drainage specialist, they know where the lymph nodes are. So they're tracking the energetic counterpart we show with the Biofield Viewer to see their field emerge. In the same way, if you're learned in traditional Oriental, you are able to track the meridians. That's what you're going to be doing when you look at a Biofield Viewer image. But drainage guy may not know about the meridian, so he doesn't make those connections that the acupuncture meridian specialist does. So that's why I say this slide is really the basics. It marries in, it integrates in really well experience that people come to us with. Now, you know that I do not like talking about congested energy. I like talking about leaking energy, because I think language is such an important aspect of healing, based for healing, and we need to explain in the most genuine, healing way what we're observing and what we're trying to achieve. And an individual much better to recognize what might appear to be congested energy for more than that, because we don't know their family and work situation. We don't know what they're dealing with and what they're up against on a day-to-day level. So I really respect an individual's energy field, biofield, when it comes before me, because them here already. And then my journey with them is, what are the stepping stones that we can take together, or they can take, that are going to journey them into this wonderful process of biofield optimization, shining with symmetrical, and this supports our immunity and our ability to deal with stress in all ways. Right, so P break. My show. Your screen sharing, so I'm going to stop that. I'm going to have a pee, and I encourage you to as well. I mean, I've got water here. Right. Ooh! Crikey. Still in. I'm going to get back into my slide share, and we'll carry on with our, make sure that I present to everybody. And I guess I will, so you're looking at my slides by now. That's great. So the what is the focal point? Well, that's the thing that catches your eye. Symmetry, the significance of colors, the brightness, the color banding and intersections, and entities. And these are basic aspects of our interpretation. So I'm just going to run through these quickly. That which catches your eye, it's clearly an area that is of sync with the local area around it. We know to associate blue with this area, so because we're seeing a slower red color, that means that sluggish energy in an area where there should be faster energy, in very basic terms. So that's pooling, and we want to sit that area in some way. Obviously, we're exploring the emotional counterpart, but this image is a biofield viewer image, so we're speaking to the systems of the body, and in the chakra viewer images, we're speaking to the emotions and the spiritual counterpart. So it's also very important to observe symmetry, not just on the body. As you know, symmetry to me is a crucial indicator of biofield optimization. And when we see alongside this symmetry, endorse an individual, in this case a young science scholar, also working on our Reiki share groups. We used to have urban retreats at our center. Exeter, as you may know, is one of the great centres for holistic in the UK. And we were there for a number of years. And this young fellow used to be a brilliant scholar, and is a brilliant Reiki master, but we were able to image him, and you can see that very nice white above his crown. The pictures are taken side by side from the same room, the same lab, the same lighting, the same everything. So when you do have image and then images of people whose health is optimized, then we can compare them, and clearly similar is an issue here. In the left image, still seeing the integrity of the color bands as if he wasn't even there, and that's actually great. The effect we're seeing is of a brightening effect. He's not interfering with the color bands because he's not even emanating any drops, dare I say, whereas bioplasmic emissions and biophotonic emissions are compromised. They're carrying a lot of material which is slowing the emanations and maybe even blocking them, and that's why it's pooling over her body. They both have beautiful bright brown chakras. Logistics. Sadly, this young mother was dead within a few weeks of this image. So to be underestimated, congested the energy body gets. And in her case, of course, with so much compromise, heart, solar plexus, and the navel region especially, she didn't have the strength to fight it off. And in this case, I think she has a tumor in the throat, which is why that area has been pencil highlighted. And you can see a particularly murky patch on either side, showing a complete lack of symmetry, and perhaps the actual site of the tumor itself. And of course, tumors we observe energetically are very bright when they're very active and malignant, but as they become, as necrosis sets into the core of the tumor, that can darken and become very murky and eventually black energetically. But in terms of biofield shielding, obviously with the, as I said, with the biofield viewer image, which both of these two are, energetic activity, the counterpart activity to the underlying system. On the left-hand side, we're seeing cooling associated with respiration, because we're almost seeing the outlines of the lung, although they're actually higher than that, but the chest region, And of course, the question to ask this fellow is, you know, do you live in a polluted environment, or are you a smoker? Yeah, I live in a polluted environment and I'm a heavy smoker. You know, that's the answer. So we're probing, realize and understand what may be causing these underlying issues. I've spoken about environment because this is a biofield viewer image. If it was a chakra, and of course we're going to have them in this fellow's set as well, and we'll be speaking about grief and sadness. So it could be the environment, be grief and sadness, but the indicator will be where it shows up more. Some tissues show up image that doesn't even show up in the chakra viewer image, or the other way around. And if that's the case, then you can use that information as where this issue may be rooted. Is it an emotional problem? Is it a karmic problem? Issue, and so forth. So there definitely is stages of shielding. When we first see shielding setting in, it attainment almost, and we see the lovely thin lines that we like to see in the biofield thicken, almost like a rubber ring area, in this case around the chakra, this navel entire region. And so this is an early stage of shielding or congestion. And then we can see that that area fills in, but it still is only just a little disc, a sort of three-dimensional disc. As that issue more and more chronic, we actually lose the body to the developing issue. And in this case, I know it's quite a small picture, but it's like candy floss or cotton candy, you say in America, where actually that little sort of thin pooling has now become quite an advanced, thickened area in dimensionality. And of course, in the latter picture, the shielding is showing through the underwear and actually corresponds from a medical perspective with challenges to the prostate gland. But notice there are often other indicators. There's a lot of pooling in the arms, in the top of the thighs, and actually what appears to be energy leaking on the sides, often like a pressure cooker. When there's a lot of congested area, the energy can't flow, so it just goes to ground, a bit like a pressure cooker. It valves off rather than blows or overboils your cabbage. So focal point, symmetry, shielding, and now venting. These are things we're observing in the analysis process. We're looking at all 16, 20 images. So for example, in this case, we'll look at the one side shot and we'll notice this pooling around the chest area, and Biofield will be speaking to the physical systems of the body, the energy associated with the physical systems, and it's more prominent on the left side. Heart being prominent on the left side. My first question is, do you have a history to cardiac health? Yes, I've just had 15 years ago I had heart bypass, whatever it is. Notice also the venting, commonly associated with intense pooling, is venting. Be another area of concern health-wise, with all that energy leaking away. Now, this case, not as severe as this case, but exactly the same. Do you what we notice as issues become more severe? Well, of course, the pooling becomes more profound, and the venting, the flow becomes more profound. But then also we notice other things, and in this case, I call it and relate it to the formation of optography, where so much such silt is deposited in certain areas that there can be no flow. Another aspect of this is that the biofield is ignoring the extremities so that it can focus its reduced flow and reduced vitality in the vital organs. That's really what we're seeing here. There's our young fellow again as a comparison. It's just this concept of brightness. I mean, I am delighted that with biofield readings, we're able to tap into a hero of adjectives and analogies to describe what we're seeing. And in this case on the left, we don't see any of the color bandings. They've all been lost in the color of biofield that this fellow brings with him. How dark it is at the throat. If we did a pixel analysis in the throat, you could easily find pixels there. And so I would be highly concerned about the vitality in that region. And of course now, this moment becomes an opportunity to see these issues, addressing them. And I think the contrast with those two images helps us to realize the type of things that we see in our everyday analysis. Again, this image shows actually a fellow with a slipped disc, as I understand it. And if you look at straight on back shot, you can see the energy with the inflammation around that particular area. But when we turn him sideways, importantly, we can see a plume of energy venting from just below or just above the exact site. And also, bearing in mind, the throat clearly has a lot of pooling as well. And as I've said several times now, we often see energy leaking away from the system when its pathways are congested or blocked. It would cause further damage, and it's better for this energy just to flow to ground than it is to further challenge these congestions. Now, recently I've been talking a lot about these color bands, and in this case you can see the kind of speckling that I've been addressing, how the color bands in a healthy person, low stress, are clear and bright, like a rainbow. You know, you go outside, look at a rainbow, and it pops from red to orange. Whereas clearly here, the blues and the green are all interspersed. And even we've seen this speckling, and she has that kind of slightly stressed out look even on her face, doesn't she? But clearly, energetically, this an indication of spatial speckling all around the field. And as far as we're concerned, if there was a scale for stress, as these color bands lose their clarity, especially the definition at the end. So just to cover a couple of the other basics that we have to be conscious of when we go into the interpretation process. In fact, well, you know very well that when we're taking a set of images of the lower part of the body, we recommend crossing the chest or above the head, just so we don't have to have the arms down around the legs when we're trying to analyze the legs. So in this case, you can see clearly why we recommend that, because it makes a bit of a mess. And if that fellow was standing closer back to the wall and he had his arms crossed, we could really analyze that sluggish, congested, shielded energy in his legs, which spells one thing, a lack. And what is also interesting, I've spoken about these stepping stones. Unless you deal with this issue first, other areas will not proceed. The baseline, it's the starting point. And as you can see in this case with his red socks and red feet, very slow getting grounded. He needs bare feet in the ground, maybe do Tai Chi or something. So clothing obviously can get in the way. In this case, a sort of thick hoodie, while clearly we can see what's going on at the throat chakra and sort of in the area that we can see. But the actual hoodie itself is not really helping us at all. obviously, if we recommend people come with the appropriate clothing in the first place, in this case, perhaps a cotton bra and underwear, or a thin white t-shirt, or a little vest, but essentially not a thick black. Doesn't help us. But as I said, we can clearly see other information. We need to be conscious about tattoos, especially little random ones that we may not have observed, and that's why we recommend you observe your client, for instance, in the normal image. Then you can see shadow, you can see tattoos, and then when you switch it over for the first time, your mind's eyes remembered these artifacts. Which I'm sure you're familiar with. We do observe entities and their effect on individuals from time to time. There are some key characteristics, although they're not unique. Red eyes, child has those little kind of ruby red eyes, and also notice the kind of loops at the ears, and then of course entity of the body. This is a small child in a mortuary, so we're clearly seeing facial features. But interestingly, in my experience, entities do wear clothes, so they have their energetic. Okay, so let's have some look at some new slides with regard to interpretation. I like to look at a set of 16 images if I'm going to do an interpretation or reading for an individual. But in this project, I'll show you the kind of type of stage of onset of issues. And so this young, nice case of a nice symmetrical field, bandings are nicely going into each other, very bright field. So this is very much in touch with her own divinity. She's also quite intuitive, although a little challenged by her intuition right now, seeing her own inner self. And so I've got a great opportunity sitting with her to go, hang on, why are you doing this? First time someone can observe something so strangely fundamental and yet quite obscure. Clearly we can kind of an issue on the right hand side of her jaw. This is a Biofield Viewer image. It could be a clenching issue, a grinding issue, or a particular dental issue. And you can see how that has had a transformative effect slightly, I would say, in her lymphatic system around her throat. But still a lovely bright throat chakra, lovely symmetric chakras all the way down, nice and bright and aligned. And gee, you know, we're nitpicking when we have to speak to someone like this, but significant. I think you'll agree. Okay, so we move to another fellow. A fellow in this case, chakra viewer mode, but equally divine, wonderful divinity shining through here. And in the case of the young lady, we've got some very interesting colors around her crown there, her head, turquoises and blues, silveries, wonderful colors. This guy doesn't quite get up to that white light, although we can see it under his arms. It's more of a greeniness. He's getting a lot of healing. That's the kind of, clearly in the region associated with his jaw, there's a lot of congestion and pooling there. And again, clearly a shield over his brow chakra. Nice and bright, nice and symmetric energy flow going down through the arms. And probably not that much work to get him back to his optimization, which probably includes some holistic dentistry, I might add. But certainly from my perspective, I'd recommend him oil pulling. So now we're starting to see which seem to have where losing our brightness. Case, a lot of yellow around the close body field. And we associate with intellectualizing too much thinking, and that too much thinking just kind of disallows us own to embrace our own. So this lady embraces her own divinity, much thinking. She just accepts who she is and lives and is in the now. And maybe him too, to a certain extent. But this guy is now bogged down in the world of thoughts and physical issues. Correspondingly, we're seeing some energetic pooling, but still a lovely brightness in the solar plexus region, pooling, the pooled areas around the jaw and the throat, left shoulder, could relate to face, but clearly there's an emotional, because this is a chakra viewer image. So is this fellow not feeling heard, speaking his truth? So, and yet we've got a lot to work with. This brightness is very encouraging. So as we head off into Ale, if you like, we see more and more pooling on the body, more of our thin pink lines to pooling. We lose symmetry, and it's interesting because this guy's standing up as far as he's concerned, but we can all see this left shoulder is considerably higher than his left shoulder, and that may be very much a part of why we're seeing all this pooling, all this shielding in his field. He may have a serious or structural spinal issue that is affecting all of his. Okay, so again, we're descending into this coherency, a loss of brightness, loss of symmetry, and to a certain extent, we could be really at the edge of symptoms and disease, because here we're experiencing energetic concerns that may not be anything more than a little tickle in the throat or a sore throat, whereas by now actually have irritable bowel syndrome, some kind of medication for cardiac function. Loss of feeling that gives it away. But of course, these are all just the individual in the starting blocks. It's the first image experience with us, and we're going to take them on a journey into symmetry, into brightomization, and having these guidelines to show us where we need to direct our focus to ourselves become more efficient and significantly more masterful of our modalities, because we get that biofeedback loop. This lady is sitting in front of you, seeing herself on the Biofield Viewer. You're experiencing and giving her a Reiki session or a pranic session or whatever it is, tuning forks, and we're seeing the symmetry and the brightness improve. She's able to observe her own healing, staying focused and intent. She can become part of that healing loop. She has to be, to improve and to take on from the space that's being held. So exciting stuff, and clearly this lady's wearing underwear. Take a great reading from her, but we can almost imagine what's going on under that polyester bra, and the bra kind of hides it. So do be conscious of this. Want to investigate, then you can appreciate we can't recognize who they are. It's a total anonymous, and maybe it is an opportunity for them to undress, and you can actually examine all areas. You never need to take your underwear off. Sometimes where the brassiere needs to go. So I've got a couple of cases here that I wanted to run through with you. gives us an opportunity to work together, if you like, looking at the image, observing the symmetry, observing strange as in perhaps not being patterns. You can see I've scored this lady an 8 out of 10. You know, it's actually pretty impressive. Clearly, we've got a couple of focal points and issues. In fact, we just had a similar case with sadness, grief, or was it environmental? Because we're observing it profoundly in the chakra viewer image. But certainly someone who I think would respond very well. So thickening of bands at the torso, pooling in the cheeks and brow, and then it's silver and orange, strong positive colours, well balanced, and the alignment is good. So we have a sense, I think, with a lady who, not like this, may takes a lot of work, may have to make a major commitment, may have to make some major lifestyle changes. Here, a bit of advice, perhaps again, seems you might have some sinuses. From an energetic perspective, we can see that here. So dietary changes that could improve. And as there's some sadness and grief she's carrying that that she's honoured these family members by grieving them and holding this badge of honour. But that badge of honour isn't serving them. And maybe it's time to digest that love shield and the pain shield and felt a little bit more to each other. Okay. Case, I mean, clearly, just looking at individual images here and speaking about them, but when we're doing a full set of a proper interpretation, full set of images. But this one does interestingly highlight something I brought up a lot earlier in this presentation, which is the energetic part to the spine. And we can see clearly here in the back, a couple of areas where our bands, instead of being nice and thin and pink, thickening, but instead of being nice and thin and pink, they're pooling up rings. And we've recently spoken about that and how that's the first stage of yielding. Of course, what we're really seeing is a lot of energetic tension and bioplasmic, biophotonic activity that is reflecting a great deal of perhaps inflammation, well, not a great deal of perhaps, but inflammation and potentially pain in that region. Working alongside understandings of which vertebrae we're looking at and what they relate to may allow us and find new keys to unlocking things. Because you remember I speak about my ruler? That's quite a nice straight line across the bottom with her her shorts. And across there. It's a really pretty symmetrical, sloping down. So we need to find out what that area is. Is it a specific injury? Is it a hot spot, a damaged area, and so forth? So symmetry in this image is not as good as that last one. We really do look here. There's clearly some pooling on the that's not so profound on the left shoulder, happens coming down the left and right arms. It's a nice case, so we're definitely over the 5. A slight loss of symmetry which needs to be taken note of. Of thoughtfulness, but then maybe overthinking. That's the sensible way of explaining that. Okay, so here we have one more. I'm sure you're all observing that fabulous brow chakra. the very high frequency colors that we associate with psychic function, those indigos and violets and purples. Chakra. A chronic dentate has affected ability to, interestingly. So it's the teeth and the lymphatic system. We're observing the energy associated with both of them, and they're both asymmetrical to the right side and clearly indicating holistic dentistry, oil pulling, and then also the underlying communication issues about speaking truth and so forth. It's just popping, so it's an ironic. You just need to speak to this lady from a psychic perspective and she'll understand. Ready for it. Next one. So a lot of shielding in this image. We're seeing pooling on the face, at the jaw, around the eyes, even on the forehead, over the chest area and the stomach. Symmetry. 6 out of 10. There are losses of symmetry either side. Below the chest, we're seeing pooling on the left side, left shoulder, and so forth. Right outer field, and I like the way the colors break into each other, although there is a sort of fracture around the edge. Has irritable bowel syndrome, we know that from the analysis in this particular case. So we're seeing corresponding thickening, lack of symmetry, and a lack of brightness, really. And look at the color change with this one, because I can see my upcoming slide. This fellow's all kind of orange and green, whereas this lady is green and blue. Doing a lot of healing, but crikey, she's probably been told by somebody not to trust her intuition, that is. My God. Maybe due to stress or depression. Yeah. Throat chakra, lower energy. Much better to speak about the chakras and the energy field than go anywhere else, because we're doing chakra readings here, so best to talk about that. Here we're seeing pooling in the legs. It's not chronic pooling. We saw in that case, which was the artifact case with the guy's arms down, where you could see red up to his shins, up to his knees. And then further, there is something getting through here. So recommendations for this person, those recommendations will result in a settlement, is what you could say here. But it is amazing how chronic that pooling can get. It's his entire chest, and this really is a you know, as a chakra viewer image, it really must some way. And clearly, he's a smoker as well, so yeah, interesting. Nice symmetry though. I don't know why we haven't got a symmetry mark on them. I'm sorry about that. Losing symmetry on this one as we head down the back, and it is interesting. We can actually see the energy associated with the vertebrae that are in concern, and then to the right, the energy in the muscles that is, the energy associated with the muscles that is also in this case congested, but much more down the right hand side, which of course would indicate to a chiropractor or spinal specialist what may be the cause and how to help that individual. So it's definitely important for us to explore the client before we take a set of images, but that's not an exclusive process. As you can see down on the bottom of this slide, it says recorded with Screencast-O-Matic. Now you can freely download that program, and when the Biofield Viewer is on, running on your screen, you can activate and capture the screen and record the entire session. And you will observe the phase shifts that I was just speaking about. And in this case, it happens halfway through the video. I don't think this is actually the video, but you can see it on our Biofield Viewer Facebook page, where the healing is going on, and then suddenly, woof, the phase shift happens. Now, when people first come in and see themselves, you know, it's really important to encourage them about the journey that they can be on now. And language, as I've mentioned, is such a crucial part of this journey. And yet, the pictures speak 1,000 words. And this is an example of someone who went through a healing program in Denver. Colleagues Elzbieta, and she does body talk. Two slides coming are the before and afters of 2 people on that program. Just 6 weeks long, so it is amazing when we turn our focus to our own fields with a healer space on our journey. Ideally a biofield unit, so we can get this biofield back effect. See, I mean, imagine what this young girl must feel after that 6-week journey, to see herself side by side from when she came in, out, all that pooling, all that congestion, shielding, all this sort of spiritual cosmic being, frustrated spiritual cosmic being, suddenly allowing the divinity into enlighten her. It's totally symmetrical, shining, bright. Oh my God, I mean, what a fantastic thing to be able to bookend with these 2 images. That lady's journey from compromise into her wholeness. And it's not a unique picture. I've got a whole set of them like this. There you go. Another one of these participants in that program, and again, lost their anonymity in these images so that we can look at them. But certainly inspired to honor them and the sessions that must have gone on to see this improvement. And clearly there's still some symmetry to achieve in the navel region, but of divinity and brightness and flow and chakra. Look at the throat chakra, I mean, the heart chakra, and so it's just phenomenal. I'm so blown away by these sets of images, and that's why I like to honor them with you now. Characters, cases for all of us, where, you know, they're clearly showing the intuitive capabilities, needing that space holding and encouragement and bespoke protocol that you are going to be giving them. I really do. So I have to encourage you to get out there. You know, the more the merrier. Every single person who works with Biofield Viewer is an agent for our organization, and we genuinely support and team. So if you introduce someone to us, we'll kindly send you a beneficiary check. And if you want to go down of mentoring individuals, either in your clinic or online, new people who want to work with biofielders, and even more. Look both ways. Look into your practice and practice with Biofield Viewer, but also see an agent representing our technology around the world, and more and more people what's going on in the journey, and by being able to see it and observe it without stimulating or influencing it in any way, this becomes a totally non-invasive and safe system. And of course, we're doing energetic readings because much of this is outside of the current medical paradigm. This is not a diagnostic procedure. This is a full body reading using just a video camera, and allows us to remain in a holistic environment, addressing individuals from a holistic and wellness perspective. I hope in due course you can send me some pictures of the changes that you're observing in your clinic, and if you're ready to Dropbox me the images that you're taking in your clinic now, I'm more than happy to run through them with you, that we can ensure you're giving as much information to them as possible. And of course, we appreciate sometimes it's compromised, there's much time as we'd like, or we can't, because maybe we're at an event, we can't do full body screening, or the opportunities to still make an interpretation about the different facets of the human body. In this case, we're looking at face reading, but we could also be scanning the feet, and we can correlate what we're seeing from the face and the feet and the hands, and therefore we might not have the opportunities, I said, for this person to jacket or their jumper, but at least we can corroborate a full body screening from these three different facets. Well, I didn't know how long I was going to go on today. I thought it would be a couple of hours. I put 3 hours on the slate, hoping we would have a few cases to go through from some of you. Now, the beautiful thing about this recording, and I appreciate the dozen or so of you who are on here live, but many of you will be watching this afterwards, colleagues and potentially new colleagues. And so I did just want to repeat that all of this being shown today are available Thornton Streeter slideshare.net page. So if you go to slideshare.net, obviously this link you're watching is accessible again. You can start it at any time. So it's a kind of a 2-hour nugget of further interpretation training that will go alongside the 4 or 5 sessions that I've already done in the last couple of years. If you'd like to be in touch with me directly, best thing is my email, thornton.streeter@gmail.com, and that 24 hours pretty much. I'm not saying I'll respond. I'm just screen sharing. Stop that. Stop screen sharing. So, as I said, Thornton Streeter, you can read it there at gmail.com, thornton.streeter@gmail.com. Otherwise, please just get hold of the Biofield Viewer through our website. It's never been as affordable. We've priced it in the pound, and the pound is very weak. So it's actually $800 cheaper now than it was about a year ago. Approximately $3,000 US right now. I don't need to be cryptic. £2,350. We are offering online training with that fee, and have the opportunity to contact me with images in an unlimited way for one-on-one treatment. And some of you know this because I've done it with you, and some of you have just jumped in on your own, probably because you're already a master of your own modalities, but definitely set up, and I'm here training if you want it. There is a document which is accessible in our Biofield and our Biofield Viewer user groups, users group, but I'm more than happy to send it to you, which is a list of all of the training sessions which are available online. I think we're nearly there. Thank you very much for being with me today. I would invite you all, if you're not already members of our Energy Medicine Exchange Facebook group, to join us. And there's a lot of information useful for biofield practitioners in terms of protocols and healing. I'm also thrilled, if you're not already a member of our Biofield Viewer users group, to invite you to join if you have the Biofield Viewer. If you don't have the Biofield Viewer, back of us on the Biofield Viewer Facebook page, we are very keen to welcome you onto our team. The wider spectrum of practitioners we have using this technology and learning, and you're most welcome to join us. So if you're listening to me now, you really are committed to biofield imaging. I really, really appreciate that. God bless you.